Right, Terrifier 3. Seen it last night. Here to give my thoughts on it now. Now, I've seen the first two Terrifier films, and I'm not the biggest fan of them. I don't dislike them, I don't hate them or anything, but for me, overall, they just didn't really work for me as films. I appreciate them as experiments in incredible practical effects. I mean, they look absolutely fantastic. I love the fact that they didn't use CGI, they used real effects, they used real gore, real blood. That was always great. I always really enjoyed those elements of them. But for me, I never really enjoyed the stories, didn't really get into the characters. Honestly, they're films I could very much take or leave. Now, when the third one came out, there was a lot of talk about it being the most controversial and being the most disgusting and brutal one yet. And I can kind of see that. I mean, if you're not a fan of the first two, this one's not going to be your thing either. But I was reading stories how people were walking out and how people needed vomit bags, and I can kind of suspect what scenes that actually happened during, but overall, I pretty much feel the same way about this film as I did about the previous two films. I like the fact it does go a bit more in depth with its characters. It brings back some of the cast from the second one and it reiterates events from the second one and it deals with issues like PTSD, for example, and survivor's guilt. And it makes you think if you went through an event like this, an attempted killing like this, how would it feel to you? What would it be like years later? How would you be dealing with this? Would you be weakened by this? Would you be hardened by it? What would it actually be like trying to move on from something like this? Art the Clown is back and he's on another rampage, this time at Christmas, so I guess Terrifier 3 is a Christmas film now. And a lot of the elements that worked in the first two do work here. The gore, the practical effects, David Howard Thornton's fantastic performance as Art. That's something I always loved about them as well, is the kind of silent movie vaudeville performance that Thornton gives, and the fact that he manages to give Art the Clown so much emotion and so much personality and so much character without saying a single word. It's all done through his movements and facial expressions. I think he's just absolutely fantastic in this film. He's very, very much one of the best elements of it. Unfortunately, the gore candy is very much ramped up here. Now, I've got nothing against violence in films. I've seen lots of films that have lots of violence in them, which I like very much. But here, it feels like Damien Leone is just trying to more and more show off the kind of practical effects that he's using and the gore effects. And in this film, it just kind of gets tiring. The film suffers from what I could call the Passion of the Christ effect, which is interesting because the film does have several allusions to Passion of the Christ, weirdly, including an actual crown of thorns. But it's the kind of thing where a film is so relentlessly violent that the violence just becomes tiring after a while. And there's some scenes of brutality, some scenes of torture where you're just sitting there thinking, okay, let's wrap this up so we can move on to the next thing. The film really veers into that. And I can understand why, because that's what made it so popular with the fan base. That's what the fans want to see, and Leone's giving them what they want to see. But for me, it's disappointing because the comedic elements worked so well in this film. I felt like they should have lent more into that. It should have been like comical violence, kills that were funny, moments like that which were humorous, rather than just trying to be disgusting and repulsive. The kind of things that make you turn away from the screen. I think it should have lent more into the comedy because, as I say, David Howard Thornton has this great gift for comedy, like the way he moves, his expressiveness, his like kind of sudden reactions to things. Those are very, very funny. The film does have some funny moments. I just wish it had utilized those more, it had utilized them better. Also, a problem I have with Art the Clown, and this is a problem I had with the other two either, is the film isn't sure kind of how to explain his backstory, his mythology. It doesn't know how to explain Art the Clown very well because with him in this film and in the other films as well, is he's smart and cunning until he isn't. He has superpowers until he doesn't, and he's indestructible until he's not. It's impossible to take him down, and then someone takes him down. There's a weapon in the film that's supposed to be his Achilles heel, which doesn't actually kill him. And I will give the film credit for this. In the first two films, they tried to act like Art was dead. And in the first one, Leone obviously realised he'd written himself into a corner. The film was going to be successful, so he had to reverse that. And in the second film, they did the same thing. There was an Art fake out death, which they've ended up reversing in this film. In this one, they don't even pretend to kill him, which I at least appreciate. My worry going forward is that what's going to happen with Art the Clown, while he is a horror icon now, he's going to have the same problem that the likes of Jason Voorhees had, or Leatherface had, or Freddy Krueger had, or Michael Myers had, where they just make so many more films in the series, and the law of diminishing returns comes in, where each film just becomes another gore fest. It just becomes another film with this character that becomes less and less interesting, less and less intriguing. And I figure if they try to push this premise too much, then I think audiences eventually are just going to get sick of Art the Clown, and they're going to get sick of the Terrifier franchise as a whole. So those are my thoughts on Terrifier 3. Any of you that have seen it, let me know what you think about it in the comments, and I'll see you in the next review. Take care.